The title of my film both develops and challenges the forms and conventions of traditional horror films. Firstly, it develops the forms and conventions by using red titles to represent blood. The horror opening sequences I analysed showed red titles on a black background. I used this for my other titles, but like in The Shining, I've used establishing shots of the location to help represent where the movie is set. The setting is in a secluded area to create the sense that nobody is there to help the victims. This does develop the conventions of a horror movie with the location. I also decided to have the setting as dark to represent what the film consists of. Again, it abides by the forms and conventions of a horror film. I kept my costume simple and casual to make sure it didn't deflect attention from what was happening in the scene. The only slight costume change that I had was from normal jeans to ripped jeans. I did this to represent an enigma code of the character and her emotions, as it's portrayed of how her mind has been ripped into many different states of mind, which kept the conventions of costume in a horror film by being insignificant compared to the drama of what was going on in the film. I used a variety of shots and camera angles to help represent how unstable and again mixed up the main character works. I also used quick and fast-paced shots to represent when action was about to occur in the scene, like the conventions of a traditional horror film, and how a traditional horror film speeds up the pace when something bad's about to happen. As I stated earlier, I have used red titles on a black background, but also I've included a shadow on the titles that follow them. This could be seen to represent the many different minds that have become of the main character, as she's schizophrenic. My main title is Minds. All the letters are capital apart from the I in the middle. This I is representing the main character, with the other letters being how she feels almost suffocated by her many other minds and how they overpower her. This story is a journey of a schizophrenic and how the battles with her bad frame of mind, which end up with brutal killings. The opening sequence sets up how she is known by the police and media to have killed people, how she's on the run, and how an appearance of a little boy, which is one of her mind frames, panics the main character. The opening sequence sets the scene for the rest of the film by introducing the characters and the location, like the films I've analysed and the other traditional horror opening sequences. The genre of my opening sequence is horror. I've developed the conventions of horror films like darkness into my own film, conveying that the film is going to be dark all the way through it and be very dramatic. I've also involved fast cuts of a different part of the story into my scene of running to help keep the interest of my audience, but also to have a more dynamic story than just one scene or one part of the opening sequence. And this does keep the conventions of horror opening sequences by having more than one part of the story in my opening sequence or in a opening sequence. Only my main character is introduced in this scene, creating the intention that she is all alone and no one's there for her. The only other slight introduction was a short clip of a little boy. It isn't explained who he is in the opening sequence, but it helps create wonder and suspicion of who he is. A conventional horror film shows only the introduction of either location, character, or links to what is included later on in the film, like in Saw. So I decided to focus on one of these aspects, which is my character. I thought this was very important, so I decided to focus on it. Keeping the drama low in the opening sequence and creating suspense and suspicion of what was going to happen later on, like in a conventional horror opening sequence. I used a fade to dark for a clip of my main character walking to the camera and beyond it into the titles. This was to show the way my film would get darker as it went on, and this challenged the conventions of a horror opening sequence, as most of these opening sequences are just cuts and shortcuts of what was happening in the film with no other special effects involved.